This guide is my walkthrough for a Stamina Warden build in the Elder Scrolls Online that I call the Dunedain build. You may remember that was the name for Aragorn's people in the Lord of the Rings. They were rangers who were famed warriors as well as skilled at healing. And so I'm going to walk you through in detail the build in terms of the gear, the abilities, the mechanics, and then I'm going to talk through a battleground so you can see the playstyle in action. So before I dive into the class, it's really important to talk a little bit about the meta. So Stamina Warden was a very strong PvP class for a long time. Over the past several quarters, there have been a lot of changes that have gradually increased the power of Magicka relative to Stamina, and in addition, some of the classes have seen adjustments that have made them much stronger. So today, for example, if you look at a recent poll about which classes do other classes fear the most in PvP, Warden got 0 votes. And part of that's because Dragon Knight and Templar are the top dogs right now. And so, I've managed to work through a lot of different set and ability combinations and found this build, the Dunedain build, which I think works really well. Hybridization now allows you to use any ability, regardless of whether you are a Stamina or Magicka build, and the abilities will scale off your highest stats. And so, because of that, I've been playing around with some different Magicka abilities on my Stamina Warden. There's one that makes a cut and clearly has really high utility, so let me walk you through that. Okay, so let's talk about the actual build, the gear, skills, and attribute points. This is a great summary shot of everything that I'm using, and I'll talk through this. Starting the weapons, so I'm using the Maelstrom's Perfected Maul. So this is my weapon on the front bar. What it does is when you use the Stampede ability and you damage your targets either with the initial AoE direct damage or from the ticks of the damage over time effect in the area where you land, that will apply Merciless charge. That's a 7-second bleed effect, and this typically accounts for 17% of my damage in Battlegrounds, so it's pretty meaningful. I have paired that up with the Rush of Agony set, and so when I charge with Stampede, it will pull in enemies and their pets within 10 meters, and 2 seconds later, if any enemies are still within 7 meters, they'll get hit with a direct damage attack. Now, this typically only accounts for about 7% of my overall damage, so it is significant but not necessarily very meaningful. The main reason why I do it is for control. It allows me to clump up enemies so I can then hit them with my sub-assault, reverse slice, the AoE execute, and Dawnbreaker smiting. It also allows my friendly teammates to apply AoE, and you can also use Rush of Agony as a peel. So if people are chasing your flag carrier or trying to finish someone off, you can charge to them, pull enemies together and away from your friendly player, so I found that to be pretty good utility. This is a DPS build, but you have to think of 2 other things aside from damage. So one is survivability, the other is sustain, because you're no good if you die too easily and if you run out of gas, right? So for survivability, I'm using the Gaze of Sithis. This is really good for melees such as Stamina Warden because it adds so much in terms of both your max health and your max armor. The health recovery is just a bonus, really, to me. It is important to note that it reduces your block mitigation to 0, so in this particular build, you'll be dodge rolling more so than trying to block. Now, you can still block, and it will mitigate the CC effect of some attacks. It's just that it's not going to reduce the damage that you're taking. If you don't want to use Gazes of Sithis, I recommend taking a look at Magma Incarnate. It's got a tremendous one-piece set bonus where you get both stamina and Magicka recovery. And then when you use a single target heal, it will provide an AoE buff for both weapon and spell damage as well as armor. So I consider this a little bit more offensively minded compared to Gaze of Sithis. I personally use Sithis because I enjoy being alive and having that extra durability, but it's really up to your playstyle. The last thing you've got to address in any build is sustain. And so the Wretched Vitality set is a fantastic set. It's crafted, and I've got it backbarred. And what happens with the 5-piece set bonus, when you apply a major buff and a minor buff. And for me, my Backbar skills are for buffing and healing. This will allow me to get the 260 plus the 130, so 390 additional recovery for both stamina and magicka. So fantastic for sustain. I used to use sets such as Eternal Vigor back in the day, but I think this is much more effective, and because it's crafted, you can determine the armor weights. So that is one thing I'll just touch on really briefly. The armor weights that I tend to favor, the chest piece is typically the main piece that I would choose to use heavy armor. The rest of the build I go with medium armor, and I can do that because the Gaze of Sithis provides that nice chunk of 4K armor. And with this build, when you are self-buffed, you're looking at about 30k armor on the Backbar, and then 26.5k on the Frontbar. So it's fairly tanky. Looking in sum at this build, what are the pros and cons? Very good AoE damage. It's fairly tanky. There's good mobility through the Bird of Prey, which will give you on-demand major expedition. It provides good, or actually really excellent sustain through Wretched Vitality and the Bull Netch. And then it has some meaningful off-healing burst capability. Now, what are the limitations around this build? As with all Wardens, it's fairly limited in terms of having crowd control class abilities. We do have Dawnbreaker of Smiting, which kind of helps, but is still not as good as the toolkit that you get with a lot of classes where they have instant cast stuns or roots, etc. The single target damage in this particular build is limited, partly because while I have two offensive sets, I chose another one for defensive purposes and then one for sustain. The last thing is that this is mostly a melee brawler build. The only damage you can deal at mid-range is from sub-assault, or maybe if you've got your Merciless charge, damage over time effect ticking on an opponent. But for the most part, you've got to be up close and personal to opponents, which again is why I favor using Gaze of Sithis or something like Magma Incarnate. One last thing to talk about. So on the Backbar, there are 3 abilities. Well, I guess there are 3 plus the ultimate, which I should talk through. I like having 2 healing abilities that use different resource pools. So one from stamina, one from magicka. The best solo hot in the game that's compact is still Resolving Vigor. And because of hybridization, I can now tap into Enchanted Growth, which is a conal burst heal, which also increases the sustain for anyone that it heals. It's a fantastic ability. I just absolutely love it. So moving on to the 5th ability, you can swap this one out if you like. I am a big fan of Elude and have been using this for over a year for 2 reasons. One, it gives a very long duration buff for major evasion. So for 36 seconds, you get 20% mitigation against AoE, which is huge. And the other thing that it does is when you're hit with direct damage from AoE, you get the major expedition boost for 5 seconds, and so you get that 30% movement bonus. And this is really important, especially if you're facing classes like the Templar, which has their jab spam, which will snare you and heal them. It's really dangerous, and I found that with this ability, yes, when they jab me, I am snared. However, their jabs, because it's direct damage AoE, also procs my Elude major expedition buff, so it kind of cancels out the snare, and I'm still much more mobile and able to kite around them, try to break line of sight, etc. The last thing that I use on the Backbar is this ultimate healing thicket, and before I use Gaze of Sithis, I used to run Sword and Board on the Backbar because it has an awesome ultimate called Spell Wall, which will give you 6 seconds of automatic blocking and so therefore high mitigation against all attacks. It's fantastic for surviving, but with Gaze of Sithis, it removes your block mitigation down to 0, so you can block the effects of attacks such as CCs, but you can't block the damage. So given that, I switched over Healing Thicket. This has really high utility, and it only costs 90 ultimate to cast. And what it does when you drop that ground target AoE, it'll pick the lowest health target and give them a burst heal, and then for everyone in the area of effect will gain a heal over time effect. And the nice thing about that HOT is even if you step out of the area of effect where it was cast, it still heals you for another 4 seconds. Really good ability, because in PvP, people are constantly moving, so I found that this is the most flexible ability to use in PvP, and like I said, it's very low cost, so you get a lot of uses out of it. One thing you may wonder is why I'm not using a restoration staff on my Backbar, even though I'm not using radiating regen, because there is a passive with restoration staff where if your target's health is below 30%, you get a 15% bonus to your heal. So that is attractive. But what I found with dual wield is you can see the tooltip value here is about 10% higher. So with dual wield, the tooltip values from 0 to 100% health when you're healing people is 10% higher. With restoration staff, you get 15% between 0 to 29%, or relative to dual wield, you get 5% more healing. But I would rather give up 5% healing in that lower chunk to have 10% more healing going from 30% health up to 100. Both, I would say, either is viable. It's really up to you. I've tried with both dual wield swords and restoration staff and found that the dual wield swords worked better for me. Okay, so let's take a look at the Dunedain build in a battleground. This is solo queue BGs. This is where I spend the vast majority of my time in this game. I like the solo queue games because you get matched up against random teams, and there is a hidden MMR rating that's applied in the game. I wish that ZeniMax would make it visible so people could see it, but what it generally means is that in Battlegrounds, the matchmaker will try to put you in with people of a comparable level of skill. Now, it's not perfect, depending on the time of day. Sometimes people who are very experienced and skillful will get paired up with people who are very inexperienced and incorrectly built or geared, and so that can result in some lopsided battles. But what you're going to see here for the most part is very competitive fighting between the three teams and people making reasonably good choices as far as using abilities, positioning, etc. Now, with this build, you want to make sure to keep up your 3 backbar buffs as much as possible. So the Bull Netch, Ice Fortress, and Elude. The important thing is, once you get into battle, your Wretched Vitality won't proc unless you're on the backbar and you cast one of those 3 abilities. Now, the easiest way to keep Wretched Vitality running efficiently is by using Ice Fortress. The general sequence you can see I'm being careful here to buff up and keep Wretched Vitality running. Stampede is great for closing gaps to people who are in trouble. You see I just got another kill there. So the general attack sequence, a combo, or skills that you want to use when you're in intermediate range: activate Subterranean Assault, use Stampede, that will pull people in if Rush of Agony is not on cooldown, and that will put people inside your AoE on the ground from Stampede, which will proc the Merciless charge damage over time effect. That's why it accounts for about 17% of my damage on average in Battlegrounds. It's a fantastic tool. You can see I'm continually taking time to try to heal myself, and also cycling through and using quite a bit of enchanted growth to try to support my teammates. Now, we're going to get wiped here because we're making a really simple mistake. One of our DKs was separated and keep up with us, and we're getting sandwiched right now. And this is a really important concept. Like, if there was one thing I would tell you about Battleground 3 team PvP, it's the concept of the sandwich, right? You never want to be the meat of the sandwich. In 3-team PvP, you always want to be the bread, because the meat in the middle is getting sandwiched by 2 teams. That's exactly what just happened. So we just suffered a full wipe, and one of our guys is gonna rage quit in a minute here, which is a shame, but it's a good opportunity to show, just sticking together. And that's the main thing. Make sure to support your friendlies. What you're going to see in this battleground is a lot of off healing by me, using both Healing Thicket as well as Enchanted Growth. Now, since we are down a player, we do have to be mindful about that. Try to catch people at unawares like this. This sorcerer's in trouble. He's trying to streak away, and I'm going to try to catch up to him, using Stampede twice to get up to him. Another team steals a kill, but I'm able to close the gap over here to this Templar and finish that player off. And you can see my buffs are down, so a couple things I need to do. One, I go ahead and drop both Healing Thicket and get a nice burst heal there from from enchanted growth on my friendly teammate. It's really important, especially if you only have 3 players on your team. Uptime for all 3 of you is super critical. And that, continuing to pick off people when they get isolated from the pack. You can see whenever possible, again, rotating those buffs, keeping Wretched Vitality up. One thing you'll notice about my UI, you can see both of my skill bars. That's through an excellent add-on called Fancy Action Bars. And below that, you can see 3 little boxes. That's from an add-on called Cooldowns. And so you can program it to track your set cooldown. So you can see 3 little icons. The sword is Rush of Agony. The cross swords with the guy with the yellow background, that is Wretched Vitality. And then the red swords is Merciless Charge. And so this helps me track, in particular, when Wretched Vitality is going to expire. It's really important to keep those buffs up. It looks like our team's getting split here. We did pick up a 4th team member, but I am trying to kite, immediately pop Bird of Prey. This is part of what's nice about this build. You have really, really good running mobility mechanics. And so the second I saw that I dropped down to like 3 green players, it's time to pop that and to run away bravely. Okay, well, our guys died. Just waiting for the res wave. No need to push up solo. And people are smart. The higher MMR you get, if they notice that other people on your team are dead, they're going to go after you because you have no support. And even if you blow your cooldowns, you're going to be in a pretty tough situation. Now, one thing you'll notice in this match, there is DK here. They are right now kind of like fighting a mini boss. It's ridiculous the amount of self-healing that they have on top of their superb CC and innate tankiness. Right there, that's a good bailout healing thicket. A couple people, including me, were in trouble. And then I supplement that with enchanted growth. And so we were able to counter push there. We lost one of our guys, but able to pick up some kills, so we've gotten back in the lead. What's really important with the Dunedain build is to do 2 things. So because you should constantly seek to have sub-assault up, keep people in your general conal facing, and the same thing goes for your allies. The second, you need to flip around and cast Enchanted Grove on them, right? So it's all about maximizing people in that AoE cone. And the other thing you want to do in Battlegrounds is pay attention to which targets are squishy and target those people, because they're generally going to be the weakest, unless, for example, they're a sorcerer who's good about using streak and line of sight, or they're a Nightblade who's good at getting away. But some players will opt to go a little bit more glass cannon. At higher MMR, you kind of stick out like a sore thumb. In this case here, I pull off that guy because it's more important to make sure that we're staying intact. And we're doing a much better job, by the way. We're no longer making ourselves the the meat in the sandwich. It really kills me when people lack that awareness. But what you'll see here is that the purple team has lost some people, so it's just us and green. It took me a moment to figure this out. So we could actually push safely into green now and not worry about getting sandwiched from the rear from purple. One of the things I really appreciate about having Wretched Vitality is my sustain is so good. You can really aggressively use your scales. You'll see throughout this that I'm almost OCD about casting Sub-Assault, even if it hasn't expired. And watch this. That's a terrific peel. So that green Nightblade was in trouble. His teammates came over, applied a stun, and that really saved him because he was probably down to about 10% of his hit points. And if I had stuck to him for a moment longer, that reverse slice AoE was coming next. One really important thing about reverse slice is that it is a point-blank AoE, so when you fire it, even if someone is behind you, it'll still land and you can potentially kill them. One of the things that I really love about having, why I like using two-hander, is it's got a fantastic spammable and dizzying swing. So if you land it twice on a target, you can knock them down. And it also deals really good damage. Check this out. Good support I'm applying here, backing up, using enchanted growth, so we can. I was trying to pull our guys backwards so that we would get out of being the meat in the sandwich, and now we can push in because the green and orange teams are fighting each other. Yeah, so I was thinking about Dizzying Swing. The other really nice thing about Dizzying Swing is it has 7 meters in range, which is really huge for melee. Huge difference between 5 and 7 meters, 40% difference. There are some classes such as Dragon Knight which have in their class kit that makes melee attacks, all 7 meters. It's super powerful. It's one of the many reasons why DKs are really nasty, on top of the snare that they apply with some of their main attacks. You can see I'm gonna, right here, I notice that they've got people coming out of their reservoir. So we were chasing a lone guy, but then 3 of his friendlies showed up. I'm trying to see where our 4th player is to see if I can help them. But part of the problem is our team pushed into a 3 versus 4. Not the smartest tactical decision, and even though I'm applying some healing, I'm not able to save that player who is out front. I do drop my healing thicket to help bail one of our friendlies out, and then now these guys are beat up. This is a really good time to push in and try to rack up some kills while they're at low health, beating up on each other. And again, cycling out to refresh my buffs. Thankfully, the buffs in this build all last well over 20 seconds, so I think the Bullnetch and Ice Fortress are like 25, 24 seconds, 25 seconds it looks like, and then the Elude is 36 seconds. Again, focusing on healing over damage. That Dawnbreaker was a mistake. I actually meant to drop a healing thicket, but whatever. Ended up catching the guy who was chasing my friendly and peeling successfully, even though it was a mistake. And then, using that gap closer to continue to apply pressure. Now, some people will say to you, the damage over time effect from Merciless Charge, it's a medium weight dot. It's not a high dot, and so it's not really worth using. That can be offset through AoE healing, and that is true. But at the same time, I've killed plenty of people or whittled them down to execute range using Merciless Charge. And because, I'm using Stampede a lot, constantly keeping it up on target. So here, again, I'm trying to pull my guys back, hoping they follow me. And now we've got their purple team split. We've got a 4 versus 2 here. Granted, one of them is a mag DK, and again, these guys are a total pain to kill because they're so freaking durable. They have a healing ability called Coagulating Blood, which not only heals them for an amount that scales with their strongest offensive stat, they also heal for 1/3 of their missing health. Now, in this particular case, it would have been better if I had Sub-Assault up and ready for when I drop the Dawnbreaker. So the ideal combination, launch Sub-Assault, Stampede in, drop Dawnbreaker, they'll get hit with the stun, smacked with Sub-Assault, hit with Rush of Agony, and you should be spamming either Dizzying Swing or Reverse Slice to finish off any low health opponents. Now, if you're fighting a really competent opponent, you'll find that this build isn't the most effective for 1v1s because we don't have that on-demand crowd control abilities. Something like the knockdown from the Templar charge or fossilize from Dragon Knights, which is unblockable. We don't have something like that where we can line up our bursts whenever we want. That's one issue. And then this particular build does not have high-end single target burst. So again, not necessarily, a build that is optimized for 1v1. But what I've generally found is that I'm difficult to kill, and I can extract myself from a fight and run away bravely if it doesn't make sense to be there. So every time you can see me backing up when I'm at low health because you have to assume you're going to get focus fire. Now in this case, I overkited too much into the rear. The green West Wave came up, and so I had to pop Bird of Prey immediately to get away from them. We've got to be careful here. It looks like we're down a person, and we are potentially getting sandwiched here by the purple team. That's why I'm backing up so much. Okay, we're almost at full strength here, and I'm using resources to keep healing people. Now, the nice thing is, with Essence of Health, you can not only restore your 3 resource pools, so your health, recovery, health, stamina, and your magicka, that also gives you a buff as well to recover those resources. It's great though. The sustain on this particular build is really, really strong, so I feel like I can use my abilities really aggressively. And I'm almost like OCD about using Subterranean Assault. You'll see me refresh it sometime before it is even fired twice, and the reason why is I want to try to line up Sub-Assault so that it's going to hit opponents twice, right? So it does mean sometimes burning a little bit more. So there, you can see I just refreshed Sub-Assault. Is it the most optimal use of resources? No. But I'm trying to land 2 sub-assaults while mixing in my other targets. That is really what makes Warden pretty tough. And then here again, supporting our retreat, trying to pull our guys back so that we're not the meat in the sandwich. And dropping a lot of heals there with Enchanted Growth. And I still have my pot available if I need to recover resources because I'm running low. One thing that you should really be careful of is letting your stamina go so low that you can't use break free when you need to. But you can say it hasn't been an issue for a while now, or I'm making sure to use my healing potion when it feels like I'm falling behind in terms of my sustain. And then right there, you know, that's a good example of the tankiness of this build. I did get a really nice huge crit heal from this player behind me, but you know, there's enough hit points to work with that even as your bar is shrinking, it gives you time to recover, dodge roll out. And you know what a lot of people will do is they'll apply a heal, then dodge roll, apply resolving vigor, dodge roll. You work a pot in there if you can, break line of sight. So we've got a pretty good lead here, and most of this is really just about maintaining good uptime, right? I think 2 of the players on my team had below 1 kill to death ratios, and winning in deathmatch really is about uptime first and foremost, and then being able to coordinate your damage. Like, these guys are hammering me right now, and I just get wrecked, right? It looks like I was getting damage there from at least 4 different players. It's going to happen. I should have started healing and dodge rolling more aggressively the moment that it happened because I had the resources to spare. So that was an unnecessary death, but you know, as it turns out, it's not going to affect the outcome of this particular match. By the way, I'm using an add-on. I think it's called Better Scoreboard. It's really cool. What it does is it shows both your healing as well as your damage for each of the players, and then it shows both their character name as well as their account name, so you can see everything without having to mouse over particular players unless you want to see the breakdown of their medals. So this is actually like an unusually good score in deathmatch, 6,400, and that's really a combination of racking up a lot of assists, killing blows, doing that off healing, just enough to keep people alive, right? And so I don't want to misrepresent this and say this is a healing build. It sure as heck is not, but I've got enough healing capability to bail people out of a tough situation. And you can see here I finish, let's see, 3rd place here for damage with about 1.8 million. The Dragon Knight, which has fantastic damage mechanics and uptime, had over 2 million damage, as did a Werewolf in here. The main thing, you know, usually in Battlegrounds, I will deal proportionally a bit more damage, a little less healing, but the great thing about the Dunedain build is you can react to the situation, provide support from your teammates when they need a little hand in terms of their health, or switch into offensive mode. And the nice thing about being tanky too is that since I'm a Brawler build, I can go in first, and that will often draw fire from opposing players. I'd rather have them attack me than my squishier friendlies who are behind me, and I'd rather have my friendlies behind me be able to free cast and not, you know, worry about dying. All right, so I've got a couple add-ons here where we can take a look at some of the stats. So when I switched to using dual wield on the Backbar, my kill to death ratio has been about 3.4, and one thing to note about this add-on, I really like it, called Kill Counter. It actually gives you in the chat the name of the killing blow, the ability, so you can kind of keep track of that. It doesn't always log all of your kills, so my actual kill to death ratio is probably somewhere in the upper, like 3.8 to 4.0 ratio. And then looking at the killing blows, you can see unsurprisingly that the top 2 killing blow abilities are the hard-hitting direct damage AoE abilities, followed by the spammable and dizzying swing, and then the next 3 are all based on Stampede. So the 2 proc sets, Rush of Agony, Merciless Charge, and then Stampede, and then some other kills worked in here from Dawnbreaker, and then light and heavy attacks. I should note, you know, you do want to work in some light attacks into your rotation. Because this is PvP, it is way harder to get to that 1-to-1 ratio that you would like to have in PvE, where mobs tend to be a lot more predictable, you're not running around as much, people aren't like applying CC on you left and right. And this view is kind of interesting. What it kind of shows you is the relative like my kill to death ratio. I've killed Dragonites 36 times, but I've killed Dragonites 58 times, but they have gotten me 36 times. It's really a reflection of the strength of that class right now. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted you guys to take a look at are the combat stats from AUI, and there's a nice section here. I had really good uptime of 12 minutes, and you can see Sub-Assault accounted for almost 30% of my damage, followed by Stampede, which has both the direct damage AoE component and then the damage over time effect, and the Merciless Charge came in just under 17%, which is par for the course. Rush of Agony was a bit lower than normal, primarily because people were just moving around so much. And then for Dizzying Swing, I had 54 casts and 27 light attacks. So that's like a 1-to-2 ratio. I try to do it that much at least, if not higher. And the reason why is you not only get some additional mini AoE damage from working your light attacks, it will proc either healing somebody or hitting them with a light or heavy attack will turn on an invisible 9-second buff, which gives you 3 ultimate per second. Super important. I don't know if it's actually mentioned in any of the tooltips or things. I think actually, I don't know if it's something which is explained in the game, but that's a really key mechanic. And then you can see from this particular battleground, a lot of healing through Enchanted Growth and Healing Thicket. Resolving Vigor is low. Typically, that's more around 15 to 20% of my healing. It is an important secondary tool when you're facing a lot of focus fire. The reason why I racked up healing in this game was I was mostly trying to heal other people who needed it, right? But I think Resolving Vigor is a really important tool for survivability, especially if you're trying to kite hot yourself along the way and get out of trouble. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this Dunedain build in this battleground. Let me know your questions and feedback, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.